Good morning. Uh, while we are getting set up, let me give you a little bit of context on when we started the discussions around sort of how do we really present the industry's view, how do we really create this bridge where the startup ecosystem, the academic ecosystem can start contributing to the industry's needs, and to kind of get the industries better set up in being able to explain the requirements, position themselves better. I figured I wanted to use this time not to kind of go into nuts and bolts of AI technologies, right? I mean, that is something that's sort of preaching to the choir. I mean, we are familiar with what's going on in that area, but to kind of use this time to contextualize and basically provide an anchor for the discussions, maybe through the rest of the day, but more importantly, kind of provide this anchor to look at the technologies that are coming out of startups and how can they really feed into the broader end-to-end capability that the industries are looking, right? So hopefully, I want to kind of see sort of co-occurrence of a few different phenomena that has been occurring over sort of past decade and a half, and that has really kind of transformed the broader industrial ecosystem. So that is something that's, I think we have been seeing this all across the board, right? I mean, from a pure technology perspective, we have seen sort of the transformation powers of AI. Now, if we really put that in perspective, it's not just sort of the algorithmic technologies that have been coming up in AI that are doing all this transformation, right? I mean, any of this transformational capability need a few different phenomena to occur at the same time. So if you look at the sort of core maths, the core kind of foundational aspects of AI, they've been around for sort of like last 30, 40, 50 plus years. And what has happened though in last decade and a half is there were some of the enabling components that have come up at the same time. So for example, the initial AI algorithms, right? If you look at kind of the earlier days in 90s about neural networks and whatnot, we always used to struggle with availability of the data, and that was sort of one of these main kind of bottlenecks that would provide like a big impediment in these technologies to grow and generalize. That problem, to a big extent now, has essentially been start getting addressed, at least in few different verticals and few different spaces. At the same time, now we can also have capability to arbitrarily large-scale compute capabilities, right? So we have elastic compute capabilities available for us, where we can build models at scale. And at the same time, we are in a much better situation to sense and actuate capabilities on the edge. So we are in a much better situation to kind of sense the data of the physical processes and the phenomena, as well as the behavioral processes and the phenomena at the edge, at the intersection between the devices and the physical world. Not just that, now we are getting at a stage where we can even integrate decision-making systems at the edge itself. And when I talk about that, I mean, it's really important for us to put that in perspective to see how this technology has really advanced over the last decade and a half. When I started doing machine learning, so this is like 18, 20 years back, we were still talking about sort of very basic machine learning algorithms, and it would take us sort of, weeks to months to even train these algorithms on very simple data set. Now we are talking about, a few hours on, training these algorithms over terabytes to petabytes of data. So we have come a long way, and, all of these capabilities are becoming sort of more and more commoditized. So quite a bit of kind of co-occurring phenomena are contributing to this whole transformational effect that has been going on all across, right? I don't want to go into details of all these different areas where AI has started kind of transforming the spaces, transforming the ecosystem and whatnot. But I want to draw your attention to one thing that happened in parallel on the industrial side, right? If we look at the pure industry aspect of it, and again, this slide is not necessarily representative of the overall industry, but it's a very good kind of example of how the hardware industry has evolved over past few decades, right? So if I go back to kind of 80s or late 80s, early 90s sort of spaces, typically the whole business model was very, very transactional, right? So I would make an asset, sell an asset, biggest chunk of the revenue were coming from sort of the margins that are coming out of these assets, right? That model then essentially evolved to basically this whole contractual model where there was sort of some partnership going on between the industry and the user in sharing the risk as well as sharing the cost of ownership in some sense, right? So at the end of the day, we were providing warranties, we were kind of looking into taking on some risk of operating the asset for the customers. There has been a big shift from that particular model to where we are now, where the industries are not looking into just providing these capabilities and providing sort of some services, but the focus as well as sort of the consumer demands are more around expanded consumer outcomes, right? So we are not necessarily interested in, for example, how my asset operates in sort of the real world out there, but it's more, what I'm more interested in is what tangible problem is it solving for my consumer? How is it making the life of my consumer better? Take an example for one of our LG devices, right? I mean, if we were to provide sort of a robot vacuum or one of the home appliances, at this point, I'm not really interested in seeing just the fact that, hey, your refrigerator kind of cools down your house or a robot vacuum just cleans the house. But I'm also interested in seeing, does this whole capability interact with your lifestyle in a very seamless manner? That's one. Second, I'm also interested in seeing, do they really evolve with you, right? The more you utilize the devices, do they understand my consumer? Do they understand you better? And do they kind of adapt themselves to your lifestyle rather than doing the other way around? And I think that core difference is the key. Remember, if we had like this whole notions around handwriting digit recognition systems in the past, right? I mean, a lot of time when we would have handwriting digit recognitions, we would get these capabilities on our cell phones, and in most cases, you would have to adapt how you write the letters for the device to be able to understand it. That whole piece has changed now. In more cases, we are trying to build the systems where the device starts adapting to your writing style, your preference styles and whatnot. So at the end of the day, this whole interaction mechanism between sort of the products and offerings and the consumers have been reversed on its head. And that I think has been sort of a big phenomena that is supported by all the connectivity, data, analytics in providing these services, enabling this kind of seamless, easing of the lifestyle. Now, when we take like these two phenomena together for the industry, and again, I mean, when I talk about the sort of move to services, it's not just for the hardware industry, right? Software industry is kind of evolving in similar ways. So, a few years ago, if I were to kind of look at Amazon or AWS to be more precise, I would look at their compute capability and see how I can utilize that compute capability for my requirement. From that, AWS has really grown to operating the entire data centers for businesses. So essentially, I'm providing as an AWS provider, I'm providing, for example, capabilities that can help you run your business without you worrying about any of the back-end compute, any of the scaling issues, any of the resource provisioning issues and whatnot. Right? So that has been kind of a model all across the industry where there is a continuous shift from providing standalone or one-off products all the way to services. Now, if we take all these transformation efforts, we can kind of somehow, broadly see that transformation advantage in either internal setups or sort of an external facing scenario, right? So from an internal perspective, essentially, the broader industries are look into things like efficiency gains, right? How do I, for example, automate a lot of capabilities that are kind of cost drivers in my case? How can I really reduce the time to market for my products by building modular platforms, for example, right? How do I really have the workforce optimized for a specific set of tasks? So those are kind of the things that we have understood over time. These are problems that have been defined over time, and the technology now gives us mechanism to optimize them, right? To make them sort of more streamlined, so to speak, right? From an external perspective, there has been quite a bit of new things that are happening. We can kind of think about what tagline we want to put into this transformation efforts that are driving themselves from an external perspective, right? In some cases, it might be purely around, changing your customer experience so as to kind of make them engage more. If you are in a specific customer engagement kind of targeted industry, that becomes a very, very important channel for you. And there have been kind of transformational things that are happening within that space. Not just that, the ability to kind of understand the data, collect the data in real time, and essentially provision it back, provision even not just the data, but data assets and decision-making systems in real time are allowing sort of new businesses and capabilities as well as new service opportunities. And these opportunities are both kind of from a B2B perspective and B2C perspective. So if you look at kind of hardware industry in principle, it had in some very interesting way, evolutionarily it was relatively more ready to kind of collect all this data and provision service capabilities, right? So take kind of any asset-based industry, whether it's heavy asset industry or it's sort of consumer-oriented industry, appliances, aircraft engines, or your locomotives and whatnot. And one of the good advantages that these industries always had were the assets in these industries were kind of pre-instrumented for whatever reason, right? And we used to kind of pre-instrument them for controls, for inspections and whatnot. And what that allows us to do now is essentially utilize the same enablement that happened over the decades that were looking to kind of make these assets more reliable, and utilize that to build capability that allows us to kind of build predictive insights for these assets, right? So I am in a better situation to, for example, predict when my asset is going to fail. But more importantly, I also have a good understanding of what's going to fix this problem, what's going to be like a potential maintenance resolution for that. And those are kind of the things where B2B opportunities are, the whole space within the B2B arena is relatively more fertile for high impact, high multiplier initiatives that can really go to work. On the B2C side, there are challenges. In some industries, for example, that are relatively more mature, the B2C aspect are relatively better. But if you look at kind of a pure consumer-oriented setup, so for example, if I'm getting sort of an Amazon Alexa, I'm getting sort of a conversational agent. But the value of that conversational agent is only real if it starts doing certain things for me, right? And in a lot of cases, for example, if I am operating 10 different appliances in my house, I do not want to go there and operate these appliances across 10 different apps. At the end of the day, I want some kind of an integrated solution that interacts and that integrates seamlessly with my lifestyle. So if we look at sort of this whole B2C space, there are quite a bit of challenges that remain, and there are kind of steep challenges to kind of realize the similar opportunities that we have on the B2B side. So at the end of the day, quite a bit of kind of discrepancies remain between what specific transformation objective are we kind of realizing and what can technology essentially do to help us get there. So we have started thinking about all these different pieces, and then when you start trying to contextualize AI and kind of new capabilities within that arena, it becomes sort of a space that explodes very, very quickly, right? And there are like so many use cases, so many different scenarios that it's difficult to position a specific technology within a specific use case or an end-to-end capability. So I wanted to kind of switch gears and think about, can we have a framework to think about how these capabilities are helping a specific objective that the organizations are trying to serve. And to that extent, I wanted to kind of think of it in this way, right? At the end of the day, think of all of this transformative initiative in the context of these opportunity quadrants, right? So the x-axis basically just tells us how difficult the execution is, and the y-axis basically gives us like the impact potential, right? So what the x-axis does is it kind of integrates all these different execution difficulties that arise from, whether it's sort of a technological bottleneck or it is sort of an enablement bottleneck, right? So what I mean by that is, let's say I want to create user appliance that adapts itself and evolves with user. Now, this is not like a simple problem, right? I mean, if I'm talking about a robotic vacuum, we are talking about building very high-end, maybe reinforcement learning algorithms, right? If I'm talking about an autonomous driving vehicle, now we are talking about sophisticated systems where a lot of different AI capabilities come together to realize that, right? So at the end of the day, there are very big technological challenges that have to be solved to get from point A to point B. But if you were to do that, there are significant advantages, right? I mean, you can really change the broader lifestyle of it. But if I were to kind of look at more B2C scenarios, a lot of these challenges are not coming just from technologies. It's not just that, hey, I do not have the best machine learning algorithm available now, and that's why I cannot realize a certain set of opportunities, right? They're also happening because we don't have the asset penetration that we expect. So for now, if I were to kind of try and incentivize my consumer to pay more for a connected asset, I need to give a very good use case in terms of what is sort of the utility for my consumer, right? Does it really result in significant cost saving? Does it result in a transformational change in their lifestyle? Or does it really achieve the hyper personalization that we have been going on all across our time, right? So eventually, what is sort of the value prop there? And that value prop has dependency not just in terms of integrated capabilities, but also in terms of the assets that can penetrate the connected assets that can penetrate the consumer spaces, right? So when I say execution difficulty, it's not necessarily coming from just this one source, but it's coming from a whole lot of different pieces, all the way from technology to sort of the asset penetration and everything in between that. So for example, service delivery platform, right? So if I have connected assets out there, I still need some coherent capability that allows me to provide the service in a unified manner to my consumer. And in a lot of cases, even those are still seen as wanting. Now, you will see on the left side of the spectrum, we have all of these kind of internal initiatives, right? The impact is relatively lower, and I'm putting it relatively lower only because in most cases these are not necessarily new revenue opportunities; these are more cost-saving opportunities for us, right? But as you go towards the right and towards the top of this whole quadrant, you're looking at kind of new pieces, new sources of recurring revenues, new business opportunities, new service opportunities that are essentially, that can essentially allow these legacy industries to move up the value chain, right? So if you have always been sort of a hardware manufacturing industry, how do you really move up the value chain and get into sort of the higher value, higher opportunity spaces by providing new services? And those are the challenges that start becoming more and more complicated, because in addition to execution difficulty, you also have kind of the landscape that is evolving at the same time, right? So there is, it's not sort of a very deterministic or predictable landscape, but there is an inherent stochasticity in it. There is an inherent probabilistic nature of the space that impacts all the decisions that you are making at any given point, right? So now, within that framework, how can startups really help us? And within that framework, it's a very, very simple kind of way of looking at it. All we want is capabilities coming from the startup that allows us to go towards like this golden quadrant, right? So essentially, you can essentially either provide technologies or capabilities that reduces the execution difficulty, or we can look into technologies that can essentially scale across a whole lot of different verticals and a whole lot of different use cases, so that the impact potential for our productivity and efficiency initiatives can go up. And then there is everything in between, right? So enabling mechanisms between sort of ease of execution and scaling up of impact are very, very important. So from that perspective, I think, now I can slice and dice the opportunity space from my startup in some very tangible areas. What would they look like, right? So from an execution difficulty perspective, the first thing is, of course, there are a whole lot of opportunities that remain in just pure technology differentiation, right? We are still talking about, for example, edge AI, right? Most of the space when we talk about edge AI, we are talking about doing inference at the edge. Can I really push the space where I can learn at the edge now? Can I do it with high fidelity, with low energy requirements, for example? Can I build algorithms that can essentially learn the policies? So for example, the algorithm that can understand the environment and react in the appropriate context, in appropriate kind of driver. The second piece of that, the kind of the diagonal arrows were essentially looking at the enablement aspect, right? Can I rely on startups? Can I rely on external players that can provide me with like this coherent platforms that allows me to reduce my time to market? Can I really look at kind of capabilities that can provide generic service delivery platforms for my new businesses or new service opportunities, right? And of course, then there are sort of enablement capabilities that would go for our internal initiatives. Beyond that, there is always a gap between kind of having a solution and putting a product out, right? So typically there is a gap between a pure, for example, a speech recognition system and going all the way to something like an Amazon Alexa. And in between that, there is quite a bit of space that we have to kind of, the gaps that we have to fill. And that is where sort of this solutions come into the place that basically solves a specific concrete chunk of my problem. That are the scalable modules that can go across a whole lot of different verticals or transformation initiatives that I'm targeting. Right? Finally, then there is also this issue of interoperability. So in a lot of cases, if you look at industries as well as the solutions that are out there, they have evolved over time. So these solutions were not necessarily kind of thought of in the first place. So take an example of something like in smart home, right? Not everybody is going to own maybe like an LG device or a competitor's device at the end of the day. But I would probably have like a mix of devices. And if I were to look at a smart home solution within that space, I need capabilities that can allow me to interoperate between like these different vendors, that can interoperate between different platforms and whatnot. And so those are kind of these core necessities that still have to be addressed. So at the end of the day, when we talk about startup solving a business problem, what's really important is how can I really reduce friction between this end-to-end capability that I want to put to market. And in order to kind of take technology to value, am I really optimizing the business value metric rather than providing a point solution? So let me give you a quick example before I kind of wrap it up. If you were looking into kind of a service space for appliance industries, what are kind of the cost drivers when we talk about service space for appliances, right? If I'm a manufacturer or I'm a distributor, a big chunk of my revenue will start coming from servicing these assets over a period of time. And to service these assets over a period of time, as an appliance distributor, I care a little bit about what happens when my appliance fails. But what I more care about is what can I do to fix it? Because the two cost drivers that I have are not coming from a lack of just understanding of what goes on in the appliances or what goes wrong with the appliances, but my cost drivers are essentially coming from two different pieces. One is every time something goes wrong, I have to send some technician. They go and try to fix this problem, and in most cases, in a lot of cases, they result in revisits. So this adds to my consumers' problem a lot, but at the same time, it adds to my kind of workforce optimization, right? The second piece that happens is every time when a technician goes out there, they try and replace something, right? I mean, we want to solve the problem, and typically that results in replacement of some parts. We just put like a new part in place. And because of that, we have this additional part and labor cost. At the end of the day, if I look at it from a pure technology perspective, I can build a semi-solution where I say 3 days in advance, I can basically tell you the device is going to go wrong. But if I were to take this technology to value, I want my kind of stakeholder to give me something actionable, right? So if something goes wrong, what is it that I can do to fix this problem? And I think that is sort of a big gap that needs to be addressed in this entire space. Finally, I'll end with this. It's a very rapidly evolving space, right? If we look at technology, if we look at new algorithms coming in, but at the same time, how the society and governments and the broader ecosystem is reacting to it, right? So, every sort of few weeks to a few months, we always read about new news of maybe some new deep learning algorithm solving X challenge now. How is it relevant to what I am doing? How does it really translate into my ongoing efforts and whatnot? But then there are kind of the social pieces to it, right? GDPR comes into play. The consumers are getting more and more cognizant about their privacies. There are security issues. When we look at integrated solutions around IoT, there are cybersecurity issues. So at the end of the day, all the capabilities that are coming out need to keep that in mind and be agile to be able to kind of respond to how the evolving ecosystem or evolving kind of environment is changing very, very rapidly. And I'm hoping kind of that provides sort of a high level context, a high level kind of anchor to the discussions that we are going to have throughout the rest of the day. So I'll just stop there. Thank you.